Welcome to the wrap-up review of one of the most exciting bikes we've had at the magazine for forever. This is, of course, the all-new V10. It's called the V10.8, as you might have heard. Syndicate were prototyping this bike for several years, and then Santa Cruz finally released it onto the market not that long ago. We've had our hands on it for a couple of months. Blake's been spending plenty of time, and today we're going to talk to you all about this impressive machine. All right, so Blake, while we're trying to not fall off the cliffs behind us here, give us a run through of the kind of main hits of the bike, the text and features and all that stuff.
Yeah, so I've received the mullet version, so the MX. Mixed wheel set, that's just my style. I'm shorter guy, a bit more of a playful flicky rider rather than a all-out racer guy these days. So obviously we've touched on in our initial review, but this bike has pretty much more adjustment than anyone that buys it off the shelf will know what to do with. Like, you've got reach adjustments. So we've got 3 different reach adjustments via interchangeable headset cups that are supplied. You've got 3 different chainstay lengths, and obviously within those adjustments you're adjusting the whole length of the bike as well. You've got different suspension settings that you can set up through a flip chip at the bottom there. Yeah, you can literally set up, anybody could buy this bike, set it up however they want it, tailored to them.
Insane. So I mean, tailor the bike to your own riding style, to the trail.
Yeah.
We said before the Syndicate have been riding this bike. They ride the exact same. They ride production frames right now. And if anyone's been sort of following some of their online web series, as you'll see, like the Fox tuning series, how finicky like Menard before he left the team was, and Jackson, those guys are in terms of like dialing that setup, playing with different size rear wheels that you can fit into something. A 2.9 can slot in there as well. And then yeah, all those like micro, is it kind of for the, like a regular rider? I'm not saying you're a regular rider, obviously above a regular rider's sort of abilities, but do you get a little bit lost in those settings if you do you fall into the rabbit hole, or is it still pretty user-friendly in terms of how much room for maneuvering there is on this thing?
You could definitely fall into the rabbit hole, depending on sort of what your goals are. Obviously, if you're like a racer sort of orientated rider, then you're constantly sort of chasing those sort of 1%ers and that kind of thing. But if you're getting a downhill bike just for the sake of having a downhill bike, and maybe you used to have a downhill bike and you're getting back into it, something like that, you're probably going to find that you'll find your setting and then you'll probably just leave it at that kind of thing.
Let's talk about travel. When the V10 first came out, as is written on the packet, it had 10 inches of rear travel. Where's the brand kind of come to with this version? So
stereotypically, downhill bikes have always sort of, bar the V10 and a few of the Intensas of back in the day, they've always been 8 inches front and rear. And Santa Cruz have brought the V10.8 back to that number nearly. So it's got 208 millimeters of rear travel. And that's just a number that they found that was a sweet spot for the kinematics that they were sort of aiming for. 208 millimeters was just on the money for them.
Perfect. Now, it's probably fair to say that the appeal of World Cup downhill has never faltered on anyone. Everyone still loves logging on and checking out those World Cup races and the spectacle that is downhill. But it's probably fair to say that the mainstream consumers and weekend warriors, downhill bikes probably phased out a little bit, I think you could say.
For sure.
Enduro bikes became so capable. So what we are seeing though now, 2024 obviously, there's a pretty big resurgence in racing. Cannonball Festival, National Series, man, there's a big uptake, especially in those young categories. We're literally seeing hundreds and hundreds of riders attending races all across Australia. So a bike like this that's accessible, it's in stock right now, it's available across Australia. How much is it kind of opening up that realm, do you think?
I think it's opened up massively. Like, we've got a huge sort of scene for the Grommies locally where I live. And like you said, in the last 12 months, I've been noticing more and more kids sort of reaching out to me saying, hey, have you seen any downhill bikes that would fit me for sale, rah, rah. And there's a bigger percentage of them now that are trying to get onto downhill bikes locally than there is like asking me about, oh, have you got an enduro bike for sale or anything like that. So I think it's like, there's definitely a lot of hype building back around downhill again, definitely on the east coast of Australia. And I think like the fact that, Santa Cruz are stocking these bikes, like obviously like they're not cheap by any means, but you're getting literally, like you said, the exact same bike that the World Cup riders are riding and racing. It's a no-brainer.
Man, it's super impressive. Let's talk about, all right, how does it ride? Or how does it handle? Obviously, you're seeing the clips that overlay in this video. You see Blake doing regular Blake things, going nuts. But a lot of the trails that we ride, you know, in the lower Blue Mountains are rough as guts on enduro bikes. On this thing, it kind of looks like the bike's hardly working. It makes it kind of look like you've hit cheat mode. But yeah, how does this thing ride? Yeah,
so it's up until getting this bike, like it had been a few years since I'd been on a downhill bike. And I cannot believe how far that they have come. Like I think back to, you know, 15, 16, 17 years ago when I first started riding and racing downhill on borrowed bikes at that time that were weighing nearly 30 kilos.
Those things are heavy, and they break every ride.
Yeah, like you were constantly breaking parts, and like they really, you know, obviously at the time they worked awesome, or so you thought. Like it's just a different game now. Like this thing is just on 17 kilos as it sits, which still blows my mind. Every time I pick it up, like I got in the back of my head, like the bikes that I grew up racing, like it's just crazy how light and just...
And it's not like it's got a tyre spring or anything. Like back in the day, it was like weight saving, XC tyres, XC everything. This thing's like, look, it's proper downhill, proper everything.
Yeah, like this is a really, really nice build, but by no means is this like a weight weenie build. Like you could shave some serious weight off this bike if you wanted to, if you felt the need, but not that I've at any point felt like, oh, I wish this was a little bit lighter.
I remember we got out of the van just before, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
So how much confidence, like going from a enduro bike that you're regular riding or e-bike and stuff like that, when you line up on the trails on this thing, you start pointing down, how much confidence does something like this give you, and how much potential does it just push into your ability? Until you spend some time on it and really get used to it, it's actually scarier. How come? Because it's just, it just goes down the hill as far, like the only limiting factor is you and like your mental aspect of how fast you're going. Right. Like it just, like I said before, it dumbs down the trail in a good way because it makes everything feel really nice and smooth, and you can carry speed in areas where you just were getting stalled up before. But yeah, you have to actually spend some time and like recalibrate your brain on how fast you can ride, especially on local trails. Like I know exactly what the limit is on, you know, on the enduro bikes, on the e-bikes. Braking points coming into exactly right. Whereas on this thing, like you throw your braking points out the window because you can just run it so much faster, so much harder. Like it's mind blowing. Do these things, or downhill bikes, again, are they going to give you a bunch more grip as well? Absolutely, yeah. Like when you lean the bike over, it's going to hold on. Yeah, like you know, obviously we've got Fox Factory, we've got a Fox 40 and a Fox DHX2 on there, and I've spent some pretty good time trying to really get these set up for me because I haven't ridden a 40 in a long time. And yeah, once you get these long travel bikes like really dialed in, like the grip is just never ending. Wow. Like let's stay on the theme of grip and the wheels. This bike, obviously, is available in a bunch of different specs, including frame only here in Australia. But one thing that this bike particular spec came with is the Reserve carbon wheels. Now tell us a bit about these wheels and how the personality of them, how the compliance feels out in the trail, and how they've held up in terms of durability. These are alloy wheels, Jono. Oh. Really? I just thought the bike's so light it must have been carbon. No, these are the alloys. Should we cut that out or keep going? I like that. That's a good blooper. Whoops. So these are the alloy wheels, obviously, Blake. Mate, I just assumed they were carbon because the bike's so I thought they were carbon as well, but when it rocked up, no, they're just the. They are light. Well, they're chunky. Yeah. So tell us about how the Reserve alloys go then. Oh, that's a good segue. Let's keep it in because, I'm surprised. Yeah, I haven't ridden it, but obviously you have. How they feel? Yeah. So the Reserve. This is my first set of the Reserve alloy wheels. Obviously, I've ridden a few different pairs, and Scotty's been on a pair of the carbon Reserves for a while now, and we absolutely love those. I was expecting these to just be like another alloy wheel set. Like, to be honest, there's not a whole lot of difference in feel between different alloy brands. Like obviously if you've got a lighter wheel, there's more flex. You've got a heavier wheel, it's stiffer, that kind of thing. Whereas like carbon wheels, you can really tell the difference between the layup and that kind of thing. Definitely. You do a blind tasting on carbon wheel and you can tell in a second with the difference. These things. Absolutely, yeah, exactly right. But that said, how do the Reserves feel? So yeah, the Reserve 30, they're still Reserve 30 HD, just the alloy version. So we've done like bunches of runs on these things so far. Obviously they're wrapped in downhill tires, no inserts. So the downhill tire casing like takes a little bit of the vibration out of it and that kind of thing compared to the enduro bikes that we're used to, or more used to. But these things are rock solid. Like I've had some pretty good hits where like I've mucked up a line or something like that, ended up, you know, square edge hit on a rock where like
you know, it's like one of those ones where you're like, that's probably going to
damage.
Yeah,
but they look perfectly round still to me.
Yeah, I haven't had to tension them. They just keep coming back for more.
Straight out of the box. Now, interestingly, we've had this bike, like I mentioned, for a few months now. When Blake did his first impressions video up on our channel, which you can check out elsewhere, he basically asked, threw it out to the audience, said if there's anything you'd like to know about this bike, because obviously it's the first downhill bike we've had here at the mag for quite a while, pop in the comments. And look, it was really interesting reading a lot of those comments. One of the sort of questions we got asked a few times was like, how does this downhill bike relate to those big enduro bikes that you'd say most gravity riders are going to the shops and buying from themselves these days?
For
Even
sure.
when you go to down racing, a lot of people are still on single crown enduro. So yeah, taking in sort of like potential personality, how much different is this compared to a long travel enduro bike?
It's a different sport.
Yeah, right.
Like it is mind-blowing how different. Like you would think like, oh, it's only 20 mil more travel and yeah, it's a little bit slacker, it's a little bit longer. It's like, it is completely different. To the point where, you know, like I was saying about having them like, it might sound like a bit of overkill, but you really do have to recalibrate your brain on how fast you could potentially go if that's what you want to do. If you don't necessarily want to chase like, you know, the PB down the trail or anything like that, it's just, there's a lot more freedom in, you know, your potential sort of mistakes. Like on an enduro bike, like if you're riding like a proper sort of gnarly downhill trail, you have to really be like constantly everywhere. You have to be on your line. Like you can't be veering offline, you know, for the potential of an accident. Whereas you can get away with so much more on a real downhill bike. In part, a little bit more travel, yes, geometry, and just the general attitude and handling of the bike. Like the triple crown fork just sticks it a bit more stable at higher speeds and that kind of thing. So it'd be kind of like, it's kind of like the equivalent of, you know, comparing a modern day cross country bike to an enduro bike. Like you would say like.
That different?
Yeah, fully.
Wow. So when we talk about the potential of this bike, obviously downhill price, this bike's potential is going to be greater than your ability. It's probably fair to say, right?
Yeah.
But what about on the other side of the spectrum? I'm curious about, like, what's its potential in terms of like downhill? Fair enough. What about if you just want to go for a regular ride? Yeah, it's a downhill bike. Does it suck to pedal? Like, obviously you're not going to go up hills on this thing, but you know, what's this bike like to live with? Could you ride it on a regular loop or probably not?
You wouldn't enjoy it as much as an enduro bike for sure. Like touching on, you know, the downhill bikes that I grew up riding and racing, again, this thing pedals so much better. Like the compression sort of platform in the shock, like you can, you know, depending on how you set it up, obviously, like they just pedal phenomenally better than, you know, downhill bikes of yesteryear.
So that's one of the things, like I remember, because obviously I've been raced down forever as well.
Yeah.
The different frame designs and the different, like you'd go in an air shock just to try and get the bike to like not squalor and flop so much and actually just not pedal like as if the wheels are full of water. So, but this thing, again, full coil shock. Yeah. And yeah, it's still like maintained, it sits in its travel nicely. And
100%. And I think like you can definitely tell that's something that Santa Cruz sort of, again, with the kinematics we're aiming for, was to have a bike that feels quite sort of level front to rear. Yeah. Like it's not, you don't squat down and sort of ride, you know, we used to ride downhill bikes behind the back wheel and that kind of thing. Whereas this thing, it feels like you're riding like a level sort of bike, like you're in a neutral sort of position in the bike. And again, touching on the weight of the bike, the overall weight of the bike, it's lighter than most enduro bikes these days as well, realistically.
That's literally ridiculous. So, mate, Santa Cruz obviously done an insane job. Like it's a special treat really to ride something that the factory riders have. It's accessible, it's available, as we said, right now at Santa Cruz dealers across Australia. Obviously quite a nichey bike, but if you're starting, you know, if you're racing down or if you're looking to get back into downhill, man, this thing is the ticket of like, it's a luxury in it.
They painted it Ferrari red for a reason.
It's as good as it gets. So that is our wrap-up review of the V10. But we're actually going to be holding on to this bike, aren't we? So we've got some cool plans. Santa Cruz have told us we can have it for a little bit longer. And so what we're actually going to do is we're going to change the bike from a Fox front and rear suspension, and we're going rock shock. So we've got a set of boxes sitting there, and we're also going to chuck on an air shock in the back there, maybe a coil as well down the track. But yeah, so stick around because we're actually going to be coming back at you to sort of talk about the differences of how the Fox versus the rock shock and see how much different the bike performs. Be it good, be it worse, be it better, with the rock shock stuff. So definitely keep an eye on our channel, especially if you like our content. Give this video a like, give us a subscribe, and if there's any questions you'd like, pop them in the comments below. And yeah, keep your eyes out because we're going to come out with plenty more V10.8 in the future.